Human development. Today, under this topic, we are going to deal with the lesson Developmental Stages and Developmental Tasks. The objectives in studying this lesson is to understand the significance of each developmental stage, to understand the characteristic features of each stage, to understand the concept of developmental milestones and developmental tasks at each stage. Meaning of a stage. Developmental stage is a physical, mental and emotional stages a child goes through as they grow and mature. What is the meaning of this word stage and what is its importance? A stage is a period during which certain changes occur that are unique to that period. Every stage is built upon the foundation of the previous stage. Each stage is designated according to the child's abilities and activities during that period. Irrespective of the culture, social background, human growth follows a general developmental pattern at different stages in which certain prominent changes or behavioral patterns are observed. Now, let us try to describe each developmental stage. The developmental stages are generally overlapping. The ages are indicated are approximate estimates during which a particular stage is experienced by an individual. The stages in lifespan. The first and foremost stage is the prenatal period. It is from the conception to the birth spanning a period of 9 months or 36 to 38 weeks. It can be further divided into 3 stages. Period of ovum, from conception to 2 weeks. A human being's life starts from the moment of fertilization, which occurs in the middle of the menstrual cycle of a woman. When a male sperm meets the female egg cell or the ovum, a new cell is formed which is called zygote. Within 24 to 60 hours, the zygote splits and cell production progresses rapidly. This is the period of ovum. Next is the period of embryo from 2 to 8 weeks. The cell mass is called the embryo. Between this period and 40 weeks, a primitive form of body organs appear and they continue to develop. Period of fetus from 8 weeks to birth. All major structures are formed and they are matured. In the 10th week, the head will become erect. Intestines, kidneys and spinal cords are formed. By the 12th week, a sex distinction is also possible. Nose bridge appears, blood begins to form in the bone marrow and eyes take the final shape. This is the prenatal period. By the end of 4th month, the fetus looks like a human being. The hair begins to appear, the kidney attains final shape, the sex organs develop, the bone joints appear, the 2 halves of the brains are clearly visible, reflexes like sucking, swallowing also appear. By 5 months, the nerve cells develops, the fat on the body starts developing. By the end of 6 months, the body becomes proportionate, lungs begin to make surface, a chemical that prevents lungs from collapsing appears. By the end of 7th month, the lungs are capable of breathing. Smoothing of the skin, the eyes can open and respond to light. By the end of 8th month, since the skin is smooth and hands and legs have chubby appearance, many folds appear in the brain. In the 9th month, the fetus adds 50% of its weight and many reflexes start appearing. This is the way the birth of the child from conception till the 9 months. Infancy. Infancy is a stage which starts from birth to 2 years. Again, it involves 2 stages. The first stage is the neonatal stage, that is from birth to 30 days. Adjustment to the postnatal life takes place during this period. This is a transitional stage from fetal to the postnatal functioning. During this short period of time, remarkable changes and adaptations occur in the newborn child. After the neonatal period comes the infancy, that is from 1 month to 2 years. Rapid physical growth occurs during this period. A sense of trust develops during this period. A neonate is called now an infant when his physiological processes become operative and fairly well adjusted. He undergoes a rapid physical growth. However, the growth period is less striking than that of the prenatal period. Now, we will see the toddler or babyhood, which is from 2 to 3 years of age. This period is characterized by elaboration of locomotion, language development and fantasy play. This age can be also known as terrible twos. Then the period of early childhood, that is from 3 to 6 years. This period is characterized by rapid physical and physiological development and development of self-concept. During these years, remarkable changes occur. The uniqueness of individual emerges in complex ways. The child acquired the ability to communicate verbally with others. The child has greater physical movement and can explore the world around him. The intellectual abilities improve and the child can perform complicated tasks also. This is a foundation period for the personality development of the child. Important developmental tasks of this period are gender identification, early moral development and pair play. So, these are the stages up to early childhood. The stages after early childhood. The first stage here is the middle childhood or the school age. This period is from 6 years of age to 12 years. During this period, the physical growth continues, but it is at a very slower rate. The child's intellectual development is rapid and is very complex as he moves from sheltered intimate world of his home to the larger environment of the school and community. The child begins to acquire basic skills of formal learning and develop certain social abilities or friendships or relationships with others outside the family. This period is characterized by friendship, concrete operational cognitive functioning, skill learning and self-evaluation. After this period comes the adolescence period. Again, this period can be divided into two ways, the early adolescence and the late adolescence. Now, we will see the early adolescence, that is from 12 to 18 years. It is rapid physical growth and increased emotional stress. The onset of puberty changes occurs in the early adolescence and makes it most dramatic of all the stages. The average age of menarche in the girls is 13 and it is 14 for boys. The intellectual development is marked by the increase in the ability for abstract thinking. Self-identity develops during this period. Emotional stress is great as individuals tries to accept his or her new self and has a new role in the society. The important milestones during this period are the physical maturation, formal operational intelligence, emotional development, membership in the peer group, sexual relationship and self-identity development. Late adolescence. This stage is characterized by tapering of physical growth, but mental and social development continue in many complex ways in response to the demands of the society. The important tasks of this period include autonomy from parents, gender identity, internalized morality, completion of education and making career of his choice. Then comes the period of adulthood. Again, this period can be divided into two ways, the period of early adulthood. In adulthood, the industry versus growth, stagnation, intimate relationships being the silent features of this stage. Middle adulthood from 34 years of age to 60 years. middle 30s to middle 60s end with the completion of child rearing and parenting roles. It is customarily subdivided into 30 to 50 years and middle ages from 50 to 60 years. During the advanced middle age, physical and physiological changes that first began during the early 40s become more apparent. Managing a career, nurturing intimate relationships, managing the household, expanding the caring relationships are the important tasks of this period. Later adulthood or senescence, 60 to 75 years. Decline in physical and physiological functions is a major change that occurs during this period. These aging years demand a high degree of socio-emotional adjustment. There is a decline in the physical strength, the social status and physiological functions. The individual is deprived of emotional support of their daily occupation and conflict rising out of the feeling of not being needed by one's family. Old age can prove a most difficult time for some persons, whereas others are psychologically content and intellectually alert even beyond 70s. The important tasks of the stage are accepting one's life, promoting intellectual vigor and redirecting the energies to new roles. These are the developmental stages. So, first we have seen the prenatal stages, which includes the zygote, embryo and fetus stages. The silent features of this stage was orgogenesis, that means development of living organs. Then next we have seen the neonate. Under this there are two stages, infancy and toddlerhood or babyhood. The silent features of this stage is adjustment to extrauterine life, rapid physical growth, beginning of intellectual and social development. Then we have seen the early childhood from 3 to 6 years. The features of this stage was rapid physical, intellectual and social interactions taking place. Middle childhood 6 to 12 years. Formal learning and honing of the skills are the silent features of this stage. Then we have seen the adolescence period, which includes the pre-adolescence and early adolescence or late adolescence. The rapid physical growth, sexual maturity, development of initiative and group activities, self-identity, emotional stress and tapering of physical growth were the silent features of this stage. Then we have moved on to see the adulthood, again which was subdivided into early adulthood, middle adulthood and late adulthood. Here we have seen the industry versus growth, stagnation, intimate relationships being the silent features of this stage. Parenting and stable standard of living, decline in the physical and physiological functioning can be seen as the silent features of the late adulthood. What is developmental task? Developmental task concept occupies a middle ground between two opposed theories of education. The theory of freedom, that is, the child will develop best if he is left as free as possible, and the theory of constraint, that if the child must learn and become worthy, responsible adult through restraints imposed by the society. A developmental task is a midway between an individual need and the society demand. It assumes an active learner interacting with an active social environment. What is this developmental task concept? After examining the changes in our lifespan, we can see that critical tasks arise at certain times of our lives. Mastery of this task is satisfying and encourages us to take new challenges in the life. Difficulty with them slows down the progress towards our future accomplishments and goals. As a mechanism of understanding the changes that occurs during the lifespan, Robert Havinghurst has defined the critical developmental task that occurs throughout the lifespan. Although our interpretation of this task naturally changes over the years and with new research findings, Havikhurst's developmental tasks offer lasting testimony to the belief that we continue to develop and throughout our lives. He defines developmental task as the one that arises at certain periods in our lives, the successful achievement of which leads to happiness and success with later tasks, and if the tasks are not achieved, it leads to unhappiness, social disapproval and difficulty with later tasks. He identifies three sources of developmental tasks. They are the tasks that arise from physical maturation. For example, learning to walk, talk and behave appropriately or acceptably with opposite sex during the adolescence, adjusting to menopause during the middle age, all come under the tasks that arise with physical maturation. The tasks from personal sources. For example, those tasks that emerge from maturation of personality and take the form of personal values, aspirations such as learning the necessary skills for job success come under these. Tasks that have their source in the pressure of the society. For example, learning to read, learning the role of responsible citizen come under these types of tasks. Havikhurst introduced the concept of the developmental task. He believed that human development is a process in which people attempt to learn the task required of them by the society to which they are adapting. Developmental task is a task which arises at certain time in the life of an individual and successful achievement of which leads to happiness and also success with other tasks, while failure leads to unhappiness and difficulty with the later tasks. At each stage of development, one faces a new set of developmental tasks of the set of skills and competences that contribute to the increased mastery over one's environment. These tasks reflect the areas of accomplishment in the physical, cognitive, social and emotional development, as well as the development of self-concept also. That these tasks change with the age because each society has age graded expectations for the behavior. The individuals who learn these tasks receive satisfaction and reward and does not suffer unhappiness and social disapproval. Most people learn developmental tasks at a time and in the sequence appropriate to their society. If a particular task is not learned during a sensitive period, learning it may be much more difficult later on. What is sensitive period? Sensitive period is a period of time when a person is most ready to acquire a new ability or skill. Mastery of developmental task is influenced by the resolution of psychological crisis of the previous stage, and this resolution leads to development of new social capabilities. These capabilities orient a person towards new experiences, new aptitude of relationships, new feelings of personal worth as he or she confronts the challenge of developmental task of the next stage. Psychological crisis is a normal set of stress and strain which arises because one must make psychological efforts to adjust to the demands of social environment at each stage of development. The societal demands from stage to stage, they vary. The people experience these demands as mild but persistent guidelines for and expectations of behavior. Before the end of each stage of development, the individual tries to achieve a resolution to adjust to the societal demands and at the same time to translate those demands into personal gains. The process of produces a state of tension that the individual must reduce in order to proceed to the next stage. What is the purpose of developmental task? Developmental tasks are the guidelines that enable the individual to know what the society is expecting of him at a given stage of life. It motivates the individual to do what the social group expects him to do at certain age. It gives an insight into the individual on what is expected of him in each developmental stage. According to our biopsychosocial model, the first source corresponds to bio part of the model, the second part to the psycho, and the third part to the social. Hurst has identified 6 major age periods. They are the infancy and early childhood, the middle childhood, adolescence, early adolescence, middle adulthood, and later maturity. The developmental task concept has a long and rich tradition. Its acceptance has been partly due to the recognition of sensitive periods in our lives and partly due to the practical nature of Hurst's task. Knowing that a youngster of certain age is encountering one of the tasks of that period, learning an appropriate role helps the adults to understand a child's behavior and establish an environment that helps the child to master that skill or task. Another good example is that of acquiring personal independence, an important task of the middle childhood period. The youngsters test authority during this phase. If the teacher or parents realize that this is normal, even the necessary phase of development, they read it differently than if they see it as a personal challenge. For example, Hurst's developmental task for middle adulthood, one of which the parents needs to help the children become happy and responsible adults. Adults occasionally find it very hard to let go of their children. They want to keep their children with them beyond any reasonable time. For their own good as well as that of their children, they have to let go their children. Once they do, they can enter a happy retired life. Hurst is not alone in importance. He places developmental task concept. We find other researchers like Cole, Goiting, Christine. They also examined the developmental tasks of siblings and identified those that last a lifetime, such as companionship, emotional support, and other tasks seem to be related to a particular stage in the life cycle, such as caretaking during the childhood and later the care of elderly parents. After identifying and mastering the developmental tasks helps us to understand the way that it changes or affects our lives. Another way to understand lifespan changes is to identify those needs that must be satisfied if the personal goals are to be achieved. Now, let us see what are the developmental tasks of infancy and early childhood. Learning to walk, learning to take solid foods, learning to talk, learning to control the elimination of body waste, forming concepts and learning the language to describe the social and physical reality, getting ready to read. These are the developmental tasks of infancy and early childhood. Now, let us move on to the developmental tasks of middle childhood. What are they? They are learning physical skills necessary for ordinary games, building a wholesome attitude towards oneself as a growing organism, learning to get along with the age mates, learning an appropriate masculine and feminine social rules, developing fundamental skills in reading, writing, and calculating, developing the concepts necessary for everyday living, developing the conscience, morality, and scale of values, achieving personal independence, developing attitudes which are necessary for social groups and institutions. These are the developmental tasks required by a middle childhood. Now, let us move on to see the developmental tasks of adolescence. Achieving masculine and feminine social role, accepting one's physique and using the body effectively, achieving emotional independence of parents and other adults, preparing for marriage and family life and preparing for an economic career, acquiring a set of values and an ethical system as a guide to behavior and developing an ideology, desiring and achieving a socially responsible behavior will be the task that has to be attained by adolescent. Now, let us see what are the developmental tasks of early adulthood. Selecting a mate, achieving masculine and feminine social role, learning to live with a marriage partner, starting a family, rearing children, managing a house, getting started in an occupation, taking civic responsibility, finding a congenial social group will be the developmental tasks of our early adulthood. As we have seen the developmental tasks at each stage, let us now make a gist of what we have learnt. During infancy, that is from birth to 2 years, we have seen the developmental tasks are learning to walk, take solid foods, communicate verbally, control body weight and gain adequate muscle coordination. In toddlerhood stage, that is from 2 to 3 years, we find attaining control over the body movements, achieving physiological homeostasis and learning to relate oneself emotionally to the others, learning to distinguish between right and wrong are the important developmental tasks of that period. During the school age period, that is from 3 to 6 years, gender identification and early model development are the important developmental tasks that has to be attained. During the middle school age, learning to develop friendships, concrete operational skills in the cognitive domain and learning to evaluate self will be the developmental tasks of that period. During the adolescence, that is early adolescence from 12 to 18 years, physical maturation, learning formal operational skills, emotional development and membership in the peer group are the developmental tasks that has to be attained by the early adolescence. During the late adolescent period, exploring intimate relationships, childbearing, work lifestyle, gender identity will be the important tasks of that period. During the middle adulthood, managing a career, nurturing intimate relationships, managing household, expanding caring relationship will be the developmental tasks during the middle adulthood. During the later adulthood, which is from 60 to 75 years, accepting one's life, redirecting the energy towards new roles, promoting intellectual vigor will be the important developmental tasks of that period. And coming to very old age, that is 75 years till death, coping with the physical changes of aging, developing a psycho-historical perspective, traveling through uncharted terrain will be the developmental tasks of that period. So, today we have learned what are the different developmental stages starting from conception till the old age. Then we have moved to see what are the developmental tasks and why they are important, and we try to understand the developmental tasks in each stage of our lifespan. Hope you have understood this lesson. Thank you.